We're going to get started in just a moment. Give everyone time to get to their seats. Everyone get their donut and trickle in and grab their coffee. Okay. Are we ready? Sorry, I don't want to interrupt anyone. Yeah, we're ready. So I want to say welcome to everyone. Thank you for coming on this very beautiful Saturday or late morning, after a bunch of rain. So thank you very much for being here. And also thank you to our legislators for being here and working with me on rescheduling. It was a bit of a beast, but we're here. And so some quick housekeeping before we get started. We are going to have note cards on your seats. That's how you can ask a question. Please don't shout out. Please don't clap. Definitely don't boo. I'm sure that would never happen. And then if you could, please write legibly and one question per card. That helps me be able to ask your question and keep track of what I've already asked. And then we're going to open up with introductions. We'll just move down the row, starting with Representative Stogsdill. And I just want to leave us with one statistic. 93% of Americans agree we have a civility problem. We don't agree 93% on very many things, but we agree on that. And I would like today to be an example of the opposite, civility. So with that, we're going to just move right into introductions.
Oh, good morning. Glad to see you all here. And I know it was a beautiful day. It was hard not to just go out and do something in the sun for once. But again, glad to see that you're here. I'm Representative Jerry Stogsdill. I serve in the Kansas House of Representatives. I'm in my 5th term. And I serve on the Water Committee. And I serve with Stephanie on the Tax Committee. And then I'm ranking Democrat on the House Education Committee. And my district is District 21. It represents most of Prairie Village and a little piece of Overland Park. And again, thank you all for being here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. As Jerry said, it's a gorgeous day, so I appreciate you spending your time here this morning. My name is Representative Heather Meyer. I represent House District 29, which is essentially Central Overland Park. I serve on the Federal and State Affairs Committee, Elections Committee, Insurance Committee, and Health and Human Services Committee with my fellow colleague Susan Ruiz here. I am really happy to be here and excited to hear your thoughts. Thanks.
Good afternoon. It's really nice to, well, no, not afternoon yet, it's still good morning. It's so nice to see everyone, and thank you for coming out. I am also on 3 committees. First, let me tell you where my district is. It's District 23. I'm a little absent-minded this morning. I left my earrings, rings, badge, everything. I left it all at home. So, my District 23 essentially begins at around 69th Street in Shawnee, and it's flum to the west. I always forget the east side. It'll come to me. And then it goes down to about 106th Street, right on the other side of General Overland Park General Hospital. I'll wake up here pretty soon. I'm on 3 committees also, and I'm on the Military and Veterans Committee, Social Services Budget Committee, and I'm ranking on Health and Human Services Committee.
Hi, everyone. I'm Representative Stephanie Sawyer Clayton. I represent the area from Metcalf to State Line, 83rd to 103rd, unless you're east of Mission, and then it's Somerset to 95th. So essentially, Eastern Overland Park, South Prairie Village, and Old Leawood, the Meadowbrook, Corinth area. So this is my 13th legislative session, and I was trying to figure out how long we've been doing these forums. I can't remember how long ago they started, but I saw Nancy Lusk walked in. Do you remember we had one here in 2016 that was completely lit? It was one of my favorite ones, and so I'm hoping that we have really good questions this time as well. I am proud to serve you. I'm actually on 4 committees. So I'm on Federal and State Affairs, which is a very controversial committee. That one tends to cover legislation having to do with guns, alcohol, cannabis, although we didn't cover that this year, which is a shame. Would have been a great revenue source. To speak to revenue, I'm also on the Tax Committee with Representative Stogsdill, and I am the ranking minority member on the Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee, and I am the vice chair of the Rules Committee, which kind of covers very wonky stuff like parliamentary procedure. Also, in the interest of full disclosure, I have an overdue library book. It's not, so I thought about that. It's at the state library, so it's in my office in Topeka. I promise I will turn it in, but like being in a library, I feel super guilty, so I had to let you guys know that. Thank you.
I also have an overdue library book. So librarians are the worst offenders, so you're never going to upset one of us. So with that, let's get into questions. And I do believe this is the 13th year we were doing them. I'd have to go back and count, but I think you've been doing them since the very beginning. So, but questions. Will there be any interim studies this summer?
Yes, there will. So the Legislative Coordinating Council, which is basically comprised of members of leadership, they are supposed to meet this month, and I believe that they will consider requests for interim committees and then set the budget for that, because interim committees tend to be requested by committee chairs, so there will probably be, a couple, maybe one from Commerce, maybe one to study tax policy. We've had ones that have studied gaming issues or medicinal cannabis. Now, sometimes these are just deep dives to say, well, this is why we shouldn't do it. Sometimes they are deep dives that sort of give us a red flag as to legislation that might be coming. That was definitely the case with the regulatory sandbox bill that came up and was vetoed, and I don't believe that it became law, but that came up through Commerce. So yes, there will. We just don't know what those are yet, but I sure hope that all of us are on those study committees so we can lend our voices to them.
What do you think needs to be done for the average citizen to be better educated, more knowledgeable of current events? How do we get more people engaged, and what are effective advocacy strategies?
One of the things that one of the few highlights, in my opinion, of the session was the fact that there was a lot more voter engagement. They were present in the Capitol, and because of that, there were some bills that they were able to stall, and there were a couple that they just got forgotten. And so, it really does help to have you present at the Capitol. It's no longer enough to, if you can send emails and maybe more personal kind of emails, and we get a lot of emails that are more their kind of form letters because it's an organization that's sending out letters. Those are great. But if you can send an email directly to a legislator or maybe specific committee members, that kind of thing, I think that's more powerful, and people will read those quicker. I know if you send those to me and you say constituent on the subject line, I'm looking for those. I'm gonna read those, and your presence. We can't match that, because if there is a bill before us that you are deeply in support of or deeply against, having you there, just your presence makes a huge statement. So I've been asking people, if you can, maybe join a group and go in with them, or if you want to go, if you want to go, maybe bring your neighbor, with you. So yeah, your presence is needed.
I would also like to add to that, everything that Susan said is right. We need you there, supporting us, telling us how you feel, emailing us and letting us know, but also showing up to spaces like this. and our town halls that we hold in our districts. Those of us here, some of us are extra and attend 2 town halls a month. But no, we all hold town halls in our districts, and we send out notifications about that to everyone, and anyone from the community is welcome to come. Senate 8, our last we had over 100 people show up and ask great questions and talk about their concerns. And then we all stuck around afterwards and hung out and talked to folks about their, their personal issues that are going on, trying to help with constituent services, how we can, and things like that. So just keep showing up and letting us know what you feel, where you're at on an issue, and please, if you can, come out to the Capitol. But I also wanted to say, many folks might not know this, but you can watch everything that we do online. The Kansas Legislature has a YouTube channel, so you can watch committee hearings, you can watch floor action, and you can see it firsthand without waiting for the news to come out later that day. So, usually when there's a big vote coming up or a controversial issue, I tell folks go back and watch the committee meetings to see how the conversation went, to see what, went on, and then, watch the floor action and kind of try to stay educated that way as well.
Yeah, my colleagues have covered this pretty effectively, I think, and I just wanted to reemphasize the fact that if you do send emails and letters to your representatives and senators and so on, put your address on there so we know where you're from. I've gotten on several occasions, I've probably gotten 50 form emails and have no idea where they came from or whether one person sent out 58 emails or what. So personalize it as much as you can. That really gets a much better response than if you just send out a form letter that somebody's given you and there's no address or anything. And I wanted to also emphasize, Senate 7, we have a meeting, a forum every fourth Saturday of the month at the Sylvester Powell Center in Mission. And we've had this now 53 months in a row. And it's a great opportunity. It's Senator Corson and Representatives Clayton, myself, Owsley, and Rishu, and Melanie Haas from the State Board of Education, and Becky Fass from the county commission here in Johnson County. So it's a good variety of people who are in all levels of government, that sort of thing, and have some great discussions. And we were averaging about 65 people in the room through most of that time period. This last month, we had 168 people in the room. I think that shows that I think part of that is what's going on in Washington, D.C., that people are fed up and they want more information. They want to know how to get more involved and that sort of thing. So I would highly encourage you to either go to the Senate 8 forum that they were talking about, or our Senate 7 forum, which again is on the fourth Saturday of every month at 9 o'clock, Sylvester Powell, except this month, which is on the third Sunday or Saturday of this month, because the fourth Saturday is a holiday weekend. So anyway, you might put that on your calendar, come, and we'd love to have room full of people.
Jump in and say something real quickly. Some of you might not have a representative or a senator that listens to you, respects you, or responds to you. Again, I've been in office for 13 years. Representation has kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit in Johnson County. So if you happen to live in a district where they're not paying attention to you, just send it to me. I will adopt you. I'm more than happy to work with you and help you out, because not everyone is lucky enough to live with an engaged representative that respects you. So we're all happy to help out with that.
What will happen as a result of the fetal personhood bill that was enacted due to the veto override?
Yeah, so I'm happy to speak to that. One of the things that, and this is why it's good to be a little bit nerdy when it comes to legislative procedure, in particular, the state constitution. So not that all of you have a constitution with you at this moment, but if you go to, I believe, let's see, what is it? Section 2, Article 14, or maybe it's 16, but it is the one subject rule. And so legislation should only have one subject. This fetal personhood part that was put in was added into basically a child support related bill. And then there was a tax credit for fetuses that was added in there. That violates the single subject rule and makes it rife for a court case. Now, that is not something that any of us will be challenging, but, anyone is able to do that. And then that can be, brought up to court decisions. But to that end, keep in mind, and I'm sure we'll discuss this more, but they are trying to buy our courts. So for obvious reasons. So we will obviously vote no against that on August 4th. 2026, but we will continue to discuss that further.
Just want to add that and everything that Representative Clayton just said is exactly right. And one of the things that it does is it assigns a fetus an IRS number, and a tax identification number. And this is where you start chopping away at our Constitution regarding reproductive rights in Kansas. And you start chopping away at that, and this is where you start getting to that fetal personhood. They denied it every time we called them on it. No, that's not what this is. It's a tax credit, okay? But the minute that you assign a tax number, you are a person. You have been identified. Now, what's silly to me is that undocumented immigrants, when wherever they're working, they are also assigned that number. But somehow they're not people. Somehow they're not citizens. They do pay taxes that they will never really be able to take advantage of as far as like Social Security. But so it's very interesting how they've assigned that number to a fetus.
I looked it up. It was Article 2, Section 16. So sorry about that.
Just wanted to add, I think this is, Kansans spoke loud and clear in 2022 when they voted on that amendment to the Kansas Constitution. I mean, that was revolutionary enough it made the front page of the New York Times the next morning. And that wasn't a close vote. That was an overwhelming vote. And ever since that vote was taken, our friends across the aisle have introduced legislation after legislation after legislation trying to get rid of that or trying to make it irrelevant based on the legislation that they're introducing. So it's something we're going to have to continue to fight, even though they are ignoring the will of the Kansas of the people here in Kansas. And I think you should be very, very aware of this kind of legislation that they're trying to push through the legislature.
And I'd like to add too, so this bill was frustrating beyond belief, and you saw what happened to it in the Senate, and then it came over to the House. We were up there asking questions of the bill carrier for, well over an hour. And, we were really trying to get answers. And they just wouldn't provide those to us, therefore not really providing it to the constituents in the state. And I mean, we should be focusing on things that actually give real relief to pregnant people, to parents, to things like that, to people who are going through challenging situations where they're having to face child support orders and things like that. But instead, we're stuck with this. And it's another attempt, as has been eloquently stated before, to erode our rights as, our reproductive rights in general. But then it's also, so hypocritical in that they refuse to do things that are simple, like expand Medicaid or ensure that SNAP is fully funded or feed hungry children in schools, yet they're going to try to attack people for child support. And there are so many questions on this too. Like, how is that even going to work? How do we determine who the father is? How do we determine anything? And, I got up there and I think I asked questions for about 20 minutes with absolutely no response. And none of those questions were answered. And I think that that's part of the issue. These are not real policies that Kansans have asked for or that are easy to enact. I mean, it's obviously going to go to the courts. This is just more fodder in the culture war, and it's ridiculous. And we, as has been said, already voted on this, and this is just completely unserious and really detrimental.
Can you provide an overview of the property tax bill that failed?
All right, so there were a couple of property tax bills that failed in different ways. And so I will begin this by saying part of the reason why you all did not get the property tax relief that you asked us for and that you deserve is because it's one of the reasons why everyone hates politicians, because of internal drama and political gamesmanship. So now, obviously, I have a bias. Obviously, I prefer the House and the way that we do things. There's been a lot of battles between the House and the Senate. So there were a couple of House plans that failed, frankly, due to the Senate tax chair throwing a fit. So first, there was basically a constitutional amendment regarding property tax and the way that it's calculated, in particular our valuations. So right now, your valuations can fluctuate once every year, right? And so some of you might have experienced, yikes, my valuations jumped by 30% this last year. Yes, that happened to me personally. But, and a number of my constituents saw jumps that were even higher due to, supply and demand. This bill would have put in place a 6-year rolling average that would have sort of smoothed that out a little bit. Now, it would have gone to a vote of the people, so you all, the state of Kansas, would have decided if you wanted that or not. So that was how the base bill started. It went into committee, and then we had the poor corporations come in and say, oh gosh, well, we need that rolling average for our commercial and industrial properties. That was annoying. I did not support that amendment. I did not find it necessary, but still supported the bill as it went out of committee. That bill then went over to the Senate side, and then the Senate tax chair stripped the contents of that and put in the contents of a Senate bill that would have capped valuations. And again, this is a constitutional amendment. It still would have been sent to you all for a vote, but that would have capped valuations entirely. Now, the problem with capping valuations is that initially this looks pretty good to us, right? But what do you think local government is going to have to do if valuations are capped? It will end up having to raise mill levies. And so your taxes would go up anyway. So that bill was killed in the House. I have less than a minute left, so Stogsdill, you might have to cover the ASPRA plan, so I'll let you take that one.
Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about was process up there. That the Republican plan was for $60 million in property tax relief. Take $60 million and divide it by 3 million Kansans. How much is that? $20 a head for property tax relief. And part of that was that they want to focus on sending money to the wealthiest individuals and corporations in Kansas. Even the majority leader of the Kansas House was caught on a Zoom meeting, which was leaked to the press, saying our eventual goal is to return to 0% corporate income tax in the state of Kansas. That's right back to Sam Brownback. And I was elected in 2016. There were 41 new Republicans and I believe 11 new Democrats, and we all came in that year to get rid of the Brownback tax plan, which took us within half an inch of bankruptcy in the state of Kansas. And those 40 Republicans that came in at that time, I think there's like 3 left, all eaten by their own party for that vote and so on. So that's what we have to deal with up there as far as tax goes. And then another thing I think that people ought to be very aware of as far as process goes up there is that 2 years ago I introduced a bill to take the state sales tax off of over-the-counter medications. Since we won't pass Medicaid expansion and have $1 billion worth of money returned to Kansas to cover health care costs in Kansas, a lot of people have to rely on over-the-counter medications. They can't afford prescription medications. By the way, in prescription medications, for the people who can afford those, we don't charge sales tax on the state level. So I thought if people have to rely on over-the-counter medications, they shouldn't have to pay sales tax on that either. So I introduced that bill. It went through committee in 2 days unanimously. Every Republican, every Democrat voted for that bill. It went to House leadership, and they'd never bring it above the line, even for discussion. That is just wrong. That is just bad government. And that is what we're fighting up there. And we'll be bringing up property taxes again in January for sure. That's the #1 issue in my district in Prairie Village. So we didn't like what it was this year, but it will be back.
Can you provide an update on House Bill 2404, prohibiting certain sex offenders from entering into school property or attending activities, including what research was used or cited when crafting the bill? And can you explain your position on this legislation?
I know what happened to it and where it went. So that bill went through the Judiciary Committee on the Senate side. I don't know if we even got a chance to take it up on the House side. So that was something that ended up falling a bit due to some push-pull and gamesmanship. As it turns out, there are members of House leadership that don't really like the Senate Judiciary Chair. She is the one who crafted that legislation. So that legislation was crafted in response to an incident at a Blue Valley school where a parent brought her boyfriend, who was a sex offender, to a kids event. And so said boyfriend was taking pictures of kids. I think some of the other parents were creeped out by that. They asked for legislation to do something about that. But part of the problem is that, all right, obviously we all don't want sex offenders in schools, but you also have to look at some of the nuances. What if it was a sex offense that happened when that parent was a teenager, like lewd and lascivious behavior? They were making out in a car or something like that and got cited. Then all of a sudden they're not able to come to their kids' conference? So those sorts of things were not taken into account. I think that the bill is still could be brought up next year. And I think that with further research that actually really does keep children and families safe while still not penalizing children whose parents have sex offense charges, I think that we can find a way to hit all of those points and get that legislation through. But basically, it died because people on the House side were mad at the Senate Judiciary Chair. I know we all sound like we're 5-year-olds, but that's kind of the way that things tend to work up there.
Add on that if we're really interested in school safety, we ought to be looking at some gun issues in Topeka, and we certainly don't do that. And the only thing that they have passed in Topeka over the last 2 years that deals with gun violence is to reduce the concealed carry age from 21 to 18. What could possibly go wrong with an 18-year-old carrying a concealed weapon? They're not supposed to bring them to school, and of course that sign on the front, the big round sign with the line through a gun, I'm sure that has dissuaded many a mass shooter to go, oh darn, I can't bring my gun in here. So that's an issue that ought to be brought up, that ought to be dealt with, and this will be my 10th year up there. I've never seen them take one move towards addressing that issue in our public schools here in Kansas. But again, we're going to have legislation in January that will address that as well.
I just want to add too that sometimes it's better to let local government, school districts, state school boards to deal with things like this versus legislators. I've never had a child. I've never had a child in the education system. Why am I deciding things? And so and I have to rely on my colleagues who have education background, just like they rely on Heather and I, who've got social services backgrounds, on certain bills. And so I have to rely on them to give me the information that I need in order for me to make an educated vote. But sometimes things are too quickly brought to the legislature to have a law put in place or have a policy put in place when that could be done locally. So it just felt like to me like this is something that the state school board could handle or should be handling.
Just to add on that, Susan's absolutely right, and everybody sitting at this table believes in as much local control as possible. And but the majority leader also in the same Zoom conference that was or that was leaked to the public, also said they would like to do away with local school boards. They want to dissolve local school boards. Can you imagine the impact that would have here in Johnson County? I mean, you know, it was the local school boards of Shawnee Mission that built Johnson County. And that's why people moved to Johnson County, was because of our great public schools that were overseen by local school board. And they didn't move to Johnson County because we had fewer trees than Jackson County. They came for our schools, and that was the genesis for the Blue Valley School District and the Olathe School District. We are so lucky in Johnson County to have those kinds of outstanding school districts. And we've had outstanding people that have been able to guide those districts. And to think that somebody would even consider dissolving our local school boards is just simply outrageous.
Is there a coordinated plan to push back against anti-LGBTQ plus legislation? And then we also have another, what can be done to stop the Kansas Legislature from using trans children as their hate-filled calling card?
Hi. This issue, I don't know that it's not going to stop coming back. And I mean, I came into the legislature in 2021, wanting to do things for people across the state, expand Medicaid, protect the marginalized and the vulnerable, fight for my community. And yet we keep getting, again, culture war issues sent to us that are really destroying families and destroying children's lives. And I understand that there's a lot of folks who maybe don't get the issues and don't really understand, transgender health care or gender affirming care for children. And that includes people in our legislature. Yet they keep making laws dealing with subject matter that they don't understand, that they aren't experts on, and they fail to listen to experts. I've been very vocal about my opposition to these issues, so I won't really get into that because I feel like I speak about it every other week. But the thing is this is just more hatred filtered down to our children by people who don't understand or respect a family's, ability to make these decisions with their child and with their child's medical and mental health providers. And it's ironic to me too, because we went through this with COVID where people were like, oh, we don't want to, vaccinate. This is, a war on our, independence and our ability to do what we want to medically and make decisions for our children. And there's same fights going on with measles. But yet somehow it's okay for the state to tell families that they cannot get this care for their children. And it is deliberately bigoted, homophobic, and transphobic. And it's so infuriating because instead of working on real issues, we keep attacking like 1% of our population. And these children need our support. They don't need people at the state level talking about all, just saying really negative things, which I won't repeat because it's just awful. And the LGBTQ community has been standing up and fighting for them. We have a caucus out there that we're really great about doing what we can, but this year was heartbreaking. We just did not have enough people to stand with us in support of our trans community. And we're just going to keep fighting. So if they want to keep bringing it back, fine. I'll keep getting up there and making them feel like crap for being bigots. That's okay. But, I will never give up on our community. Our kids deserve our support. And this has just become ridiculous.
I can't tell you how many people have said to me that they want property tax relief, right? How many of you said that of your own representatives? When people were coming and knocking at the door, that had to be one of the points. Guess what? The very first bill that the House passed was the banning of the gender affirming care bill. That was the very first bill. And not only that, because they're a little afraid of us, Brandon and Heather and I, that they didn't tell us it was coming. They just brought it up. And they said, we're voting on this. And boy, were we infuriated. And because of that, they got our wrath, and that's what they deserve. So if I don't get gavels, hasn't been a good day for me. Yeah. I got to get gavelled. That's how disgusting this is, and how dehumanizing it is. And the message, and no matter how many times we say this to their faces, what is the message you're sending to our kids? It's like they don't care. Because they're following an ideology. They're not following, what is good and what is right and what is fair. That's just not a part of their vocabulary. So yeah, like Heather said, we could talk about this all day long. But it boggles the mind. That's all I can say. I don't understand why you want to come after a 1%. And with this bill, what it did, it also added that if you're a physician and you are found to do this, then you could be sued. Your liability insurance, the state also has a liability insurance that physicians could tap into if their own liability insurance isn't enough. And when you become a physician and you tap into that, you're paying into that. It's a good chunk. You pay into that every year, but yet this bill will not allow them to tap into that. So why would physicians want to come to our state? We already have a shortage of physicians, nurse practitioners. Why would they want to come to our state?
Just wanted to add to that these people are willing to put children at risk in their schools over a non-issue. When we had the fairness in women's sports legislation that came up the previous session, I went up to the well and I asked the carrier of the bill. I said, "Geez," I said, "this is a major piece of legislation you're requesting here." I said, "How many kids are registered with the Kansas State High School Activities Association?" And she said, "Well, I'm not really sure." And I said, "Well, as of this morning, it was 136,608. And I said, 136,000 kids, my gosh, to make this kind of major legislation, there must be hundreds of transgender kids that are infiltrating women's sports and so on to make this kind of legislation before us." I said, "How many are there?" And she said, "Well, I'm not really sure." I said, "Well, as of this morning, it's 11 out of 136,000. And I said, "And you know how many of those kids are registered to play sports? 0. These are kids that were registered to go to debate tournaments and plays and musical events, that sort of thing. Not a single one was registered to play sports. Yet they had introduced fairness in women's sports. It's a political issue. It's a political flashpoint that they use to make political points with people who have that problem. So anyway, that's again kind of the process that we have to look at in Topeka. That you have to really figure out what is pertinent and what is political, and sometimes that's very disturbing.
What was the best and the worst legislation that became law in Kansas this session?
Honestly, I will say that the best thing about this session is what did not become law. So in this case, one of the biggest things that we blocked was any change to school funding, in particular vouchers or tax credits, scholarships, a voucher by any other name. And so I think that it spoke very highly, in particular, of House members, the fact that we were able to block that legislation. What that means, the reason why they didn't run that means that there is bipartisan opposition. So we do still count on quiet opposition from who I refer to as the High Plains Republicans, and those are our Republican friends who represent the districts sort of north of and around I-70. So their quiet opposition does still help us, and so I think that really does show us that there is some hope. So that's the thing that I'm happiest about this session, was that what did not pass. Anyone else?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with Stephanie. I think I'm more happy with what we stopped, unfortunately, than really like championing a bill particularly. But I do want to talk about a subject we haven't really broached yet, and that's what went on with our elections committee and our elections issues this year. Those are some of the worst bills that I have ever seen come out regarding elections. And, we are going to be facing a vote next August, as Stephanie spoke about earlier, about our selection of Supreme Court justices, but also we were given a bill that just essentially turns this into Wisconsin. What happened up there, where, the campaign contributions that we can receive now are just incredible. And it's so shady. It's just a vehicle for more dark money. And, sure, it's great. We need to raise money for elections and things like that, whatever. But not at the cost of being honest with our constituents, and not at the cost of upending our entire election system. Not only that, but we eliminated the 3-day grace period, for ballot, and we tried to get amendments on to make it better. We couldn't get it through. Now the individual who got all of those terribly fascist bills through is running for Secretary of State. And I want you all to be very concerned about that and follow that race. This will probably catch me some heat from the other side, but I truly do not think that he should be in charge of our elections. He has encouraged election disinformation, theories about election fraud that have turned out to be unproven and false. And we're just going to keep getting more stuff like this. And it is devastating to the way that we can, ensure that people have the right to vote. And so I just want you to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I'd say the best legislation that I've seen come out of the legislature over the last 5 years. So I've been on the water committee for the last 5 years, and we have done some really good work in that committee in a bipartisan way. We have some very conservative people from Western Kansas on that committee. We have very progressive people from Northeast part of the state, that sort of thing. And we've all worked together because we know this is not a Democratic issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is a Kansas issue that faces every single Kansan. We have to have water for agriculture in our aquifer out in Western Kansas. We need clean and available drinking water all across the state. So we have passed a number of pieces of legislation that address those issues. And I think we have really gone a long way over those 5 years to address the water issues in Kansas. And I've been very proud to serve on that committee. Been very proud to serve with the people on that committee, and in particular this one right here as well. And so that would be the high point for me. And Heather stole my low point with the election stuff, that this representative that brought the bill to eliminate the 3-day grace period, that hurts our military people serving overseas. That hurts our students who may be going to school outside of the state of Kansas. That hurts our rural communities. That hurts any place where mail is uncertain as to how fast it gets delivered and so on. And that could be right here in Johnson County. And the representative that introduced that bill was again caught on a Zoom conference. I don't know why they do keep doing these Zoom conferences, because somebody's leaking everything they have to say on it. Yeah, just go ahead and say it in public if that's the way you believe it. But he also said, I want to do away with early voting altogether. And then he laughed about it and he said, oh, please, don't put this on Facebook or any parts of social media. he wanted to hide that. Is that the person we want as Secretary of State that that oversees all of our elections in the state of Kansas? I don't think so. Pay very close attention to the Secretary of State's race next year.
I just want to quickly add, too, that this representative, he's from Leavenworth. He's also ex-military. Just, for me, the worst bill was banning the gender affirming care bill. That was the worst for me, and I think that one stabbed me in the heart worse than all of the other ones. A couple of good things that came out, well, one that came out of Health and Human Services, although like Stephanie was correct, there were a lot of things that we actually stopped in committee or that the chair just refused to bring up. And there were a lot of anti-vaccine kind of bills. There were other anti-abortion bills there that they just left it alone. But we did pass 4 compacts allowing for professionals, especially those in the military. They move around. They can keep their license and quickly be able to go to work with their license through these compacts. It was a psychologist, school psychologists, our counselors, dietitians, and cosmetologists. So all those 4 compacts, and I found out there's going to be about 4 more next session. So we'll be having more of those. The other thing that it was a catch 2020 kind of a bill where it creates the Kansas Office of Early Childhood that we desperately needed to have. And it's one of those bills where when you do something, you try to do something bipartisan, you're usually going to have something in there that everybody's not going to agree with. And it could be a point that I'm not going to vote on this bill because it has this section to it. It did loosen some regulations regarding home child care that a lot of people didn't like. And so it did pass. I voted for it simply because I was also on the governor's task force for the early childhood education to create this office. It is incredibly confusing. Those of you who have tried to find child care and have gone through the state to try to get those resources, you're pulling your hair out, because it's just it is so difficult because it's spread out over several departments. This will consolidate that. Everything that has to do with early childhood will now come under this office. It's going to take a while because personnel will be moving from one office to the other. So it'll take a while, but we finally got it in. It's codified, so that's a big win in my mind.
Okay, we have a follow-up to property taxes. The biggest portion of our personal property taxes are school district taxes. Are there opportunities to reduce this tax, or are schools off limits?
I would say, especially at the state level, so we have, the state mill levy that largely goes towards school funding. A lot of us are loath to drop that any further than is necessary because then, of course, we run afoul of our Constitution, Article 6, which states that we need to provide a suitable education. In order to do that, we have to fund schools. So I don't like to mess with that portion of property taxation. One of the confusing things about property tax, and this is, if you pull up your, you get a property tax statement, I think, once a year. If you look at that, you're subject to a number of taxing entities, which include your local school districts, Johnson County Community College, all of which have duly elected members that you can reach out to when you talk about property tax reduction. But keep in mind that if you are reducing property taxes that fund our schools too much, you are going to run afoul of the Constitution, and that's going to cause major issues. So it's definitely a balancing act.
They have refused to fund special education in Kansas to the level that we're supposed to be funding it. They did last year. They had a $70 million increase in money for special education. Strangely enough, that was in an election year when everybody in the House and everybody in the Senate was up for election. And they said, oh, well, we need $70 million for the next 5 years. And they instead of committing to that, they said, well, we'll do it this year, and then I'm sure we'll do it the next 4 years. Well, they didn't do it. They upped it by $10 million this year. That's money that has to come out of like the Shawnee Mission School District's general budget to make sure that those kids have the educational opportunities that they deserve. So that is something we've got to watch. And I got to tell you that if it even looked like our schools in Johnson County were going downhill, good luck attracting business here. Good luck with your home values here. That is money well spent on our public schools. I spent 8 years as president of the Trade Association for the High-Tech Industries in Kansas and Missouri. And we would interview companies on the East and West Coast all the time, wanting to know what they looked for if they were going to grow a company someplace, what would bring them to Kansas or any place actually. Number one, every time, great public schools. They're not going to bring their company and their families to an area that has lousy public schools. The second thing was great universities and colleges. That's where they get their employees. Those are the people that we want to make sure stay in Kansas when they graduate and so on. So our investment in public education is well spent, and we get tremendous returns for it that I don't think a lot of people recognize. So I will continue to support education funding at this level, if not more, for special education as well.
And then I'm going to try it. We have quite a few more questions left, so I'm going to reduce responses to 1 minute to see how many we can get through. And if we really need it, we can add a little more time. What are you doing in the case of ICE immigration and deportation? And then we have another question about immigration. Is there any legislation that can be brought to impact how detention processes are handled by ICE and immigration authorities?
I want everyone to know that there is a big coalition of allies and advocates that's happening in Kansas. You're not going to hear about them publicly because there's retaliation that's been happening to some of them. Some of them have been followed home. And so we have eyes out there, and the eyes out there are letting people know where ICE is showing up, but they're also doing lots of education of people who may be undocumented or they live in a mixed status family. So that's going on, teaching them your rights. They must have a warrant, it must have your name on it, and be signed by a judge. They can walk into a grocery store. It's public. But they cannot go, but they're doing it, they cannot go to a manager and say, I want to see so-and-so and so-and-so. The manager should be saying, do you have a warrant? Do you have a person's name on it? This happened in an apartment complex right by my house. The people there knew to say, you have a warrant? No, gone, you're out, bye.
Yeah, I am beyond angry and disturbed by this. This is something that I've had on my mind for a while now, and it's so dehumanizing. And I just want everyone to remember that being in the United States undocumented is not illegal. It is not illegal. Calling people illegal immigrants is not accurate or correct according to the law. It is a civil offense. Nobody is saying that you are committing a crime if you have a civil offense. It is dehumanizing, and people are using dehumanizing language to get people riled up and angry and create more support for deporting people. They're not only deporting people who are not criminals, they're deporting people with who are children, with families here, who have lived here, who have supported our communities, who are part of our community. And I don't know what we can do as a state, but I will tell you, we do have eyes everywhere, and we will not let them take our people. I don't care if they are undocumented or not. They are members of the community.
I just want to add that really immigration is not a word we hear a lot of in Topeka. in my opinion. It's in a political basis if we do. I've talked to several of my Republican friends across the aisle from western Kansas, and they said, we can't do without immigrants in western Kansas. Said, you do away with immigrants in western Kansas, Dodge City and Garden City closes. And said, one guy told me, he said, we could put 10,000 immigrants to work in western Kansas tomorrow. They're talking about adding them, not deleting them. Try to get a roof put on in Johnson County. If you get rid of the immigrants in Johnson County and so on, they perform very valuable services for us. And again, this is a political talking point. It's not reality, it's political. And again, you have to separate the practical from the political. And this is a political issue. These people do a lot of good work in this country. They're not rapists and murderers and drug dealers, for crying out loud. So anyway, just thought that's an interesting perspective from some of our more conservative friends in Topeka.
The last CAPER's cost of living increase was in 1998. What is happening to move this forward?
To be perfectly honest with all of you. And a lot of this is something that you all need to keep in mind. We have noticed an ongoing theme, especially when it comes to our budget, of disrespect towards workers in the public sector. And one of the ways that state government disrespects these workers is they eliminate any open full-time equivalent positions. And this is by design to shrink government. Now, we should be transparent about who makes how much money. We see a lot of that. But you know what I don't see? I don't see postings of private sector jobs saying, oh, well, these private sector companies that are getting tons of tax breaks, which is, by the way, your money that is being sent to them to give them tax breaks to pay people to do nothing. But in any case, to go back to the COLA increase, we have not seen that come up. We haven't even seen it come up for discussion. And that is of heavy concern, but it is part of an overall design to shrink government and to disrespect public sector workers, which I obviously oppose.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, I've had a lot of conversations with folks about a COLA increase. I think it's so important. Our public sector workers do everything for us. But, you know, as Stephanie was saying, this is even happening at the federal level, right? We see everyone losing their positions. We see them losing their jobs, their money. And it's happening at the state level, and they're going to continue doing that because their mandate is to do what the federal government wants. And that's kind of what we're up against out there. So we can't get COLA hearings or committee bills through because they just aren't interested. They're following the playbook of the federal government right now.
Okay, and then we've got quite a few federal funding questions, but I think this one kind of sums up the majority of them. What are the backup plans if federal funding and grants continue to be cut?
I have not heard solid plans, but our governor's administration, they are, of course, looking very closely at that. The one thing that really gives me heartburn are all the waivers that we have under Medicaid. There's 7 waivers. And the one most people are very familiar with is the intellectual disability waiver, the IDD waiver, because there's a huge waiting list. Thousands of people are waiting on that waiting list. It's called a waiver for a reason. They waive the eligibility for Medicaid in order to be able to receive those services. That is not a required service. Every state's not required to do that. Every state decides if they want to have a waiver, which we did a long time ago. That's going to go. There's no way. If they have to do some cuts, that's good. I think that's where they're going to look at some cuts. And so far, nobody's saying, no, that's not true. So they're all aware. Everybody's looking at it. And I don't know what the backup plan is.
I don't know that there's a backup plan just yet, but I do know that different agencies within the state government are working with the governor's administration and their federal partners to try to figure out where those cuts are being made and find ways to, procure other sources of funding for those programs. I think that we are really going to be hurt in a lot of different areas, and it's totally understandable that this is a question. It's a question I have constantly. But I think that, from speaking with representatives in other states too, I have, a network of folks that I talk to across the country. Every single state is facing this, and nobody really has a plan yet because it has happened so quickly. I've never seen anything like this happen. And so, safe to say the governor's administration is definitely working on this with the agencies that we have across the state and the stakeholders. But we just can't really figure out what's going to happen yet. We barely have time to catch our breath. But we are working on it.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is what Heather alluded to here is we have no clue what the federal government's going to do. We don't know what kind of grants are going to be coming into Kansas, what kind of grants are going to be denied. It's already working into our universities and so on like that. And the thing that really disturbs me about this is that look who they're firing across the state and across especially at the federal level, which is going to impact us. It's the younger people who have come in, who are on the first 3 years of their service and so on. We are going to lose an entire generation of young people who want to work in the public sector to help people at the federal and state level. And we have absolutely got to do something to make sure that we have young people that are coming into government that want to work for us and do a good job. So, and those are the people that are suffering at this point.
Okay, and I'm going to squeeze one last question in since we started a couple minutes late. If we could, 30 seconds. When I come to the state capitol, where should I go to be seen or heard? When I come to the state capitol, where should I go to be seen or heard?
That is a very good question. So if you found yourselves where you just walked into the state capitol and, weren't sure where our offices were or what committees were going on, you can walk in, and if you go through the visitor center right to your left, there is a couple of large computer screens that says, who is my representative? Who is my senator? So you can go there, put in your address, and it will tell you who your representative and senators are and where our offices are. So that works out very well during legislative session, right? Because then you can come and, make an appointment with us. I have the best assistant. I apologize. I do. I win in this. My assistant, Travis, is amazing, and he will definitely make sure to get you on my schedule. Now, part of the problem is that not all of you have representatives or senators that want to see you, or their schedules might be completely packed. So that doesn't always work. I can't tell you more because I don't have any time.
So from there, go up to the first floor because you're basically in the ground floor of the basement. Go up to the first floor and you will see the rotunda and just admire the rotunda. Just go through the middle of the whole circle there and you can see the rotunda. There's also a compass on the floor because our office numbers will have, north, south, east, west on there. So it'll help you kind of guide you. So the compass is really important. Yeah, if you come to my office, and my office assistant, who is awesome also, she knows to get a hold of me. If you're there, I might try to be able to run downstairs and see you.
All great suggestions. Definitely recommend the kiosk and certainly use the compass. I still do. But also there is, if you go up to the third floor, outside of the minority leader's office, there is a wall that has listings of all of the committee meetings, the times that they're meeting, the room that they're in, what they're going to be covering that week. Go up there, take a look at it, see if you can find a meeting you're interested in, and go attend, sit in the audience. And listen to what's going on firsthand and see how people communicate. And then stop the representatives afterwards and say hi if they have time.
Would also suggest that if you have a specific issue that you'd like to see addressed in Topeka, find a group that addresses that issue and go up with them. I know Grandparents Against Gun Violence, they come up, and a couple other groups that Parents Against Gun Violence, that sort of thing. They stand right there in front of the third floor entrance to the House of Representatives, and a lot of our friends on the other side will go up to the fourth floor and go around and come in the back entrance so that they don't have to go in front of those people. So feel free to stand there in the third floor in front of the House of Representatives if you have an issue that you're very concerned about.
That is such a great suggestion, though. So usually, like, a bunch of lobbyists hang out there, but we would love to see our constituents hang out there too, and just stop us and say, "Hey, I'm your constituent. Thank you," or "Here's my opinion on something." Just go stand there. It's incredible.
Have to speak up a little bit, though, because on Wednesdays, that guy that brings the pictures of I'm not even going to mention. Yeah, he just stands there and yells at us. So we would love to see strong advocates, friendly faces, and people who treat the entire process with respect and dignity, which will be all of you, obviously.
So I just want to say thank you. I know, like I said, it was a beautiful day today. Thank you for being here. We definitely have coffee and donuts left. Please grab one. And then I just want to mention on your seats, we have follow-up contact information. If you heard something you didn't like, if you heard something you did like, please contact any of the representatives that you heard from today. And once again, thank you. We'll be back next year.